The Japan vs France match in Blue Lock's U20 World Cup is much more than other high-stakes football games. While previous matches centered on individual evolution, rivalries, and proving the value of Jinpachi Igo's philosophy, the France game fundamentally questions whether Blue Lock's core ideology is actually correct. Through an ideological clash that extends beyond the players themselves, the match becomes one of the manga's most intellectually engaging and visually impressive encounters. At the center of this game, it is not simply ego versus suitability. It is the ego to become the number one versus the suitable destiny of a player's aptitude. From the beginning of the series, Igo has insisted that the world's greatest striker must place his own desires above everything else. Every player should strive to become the protagonist of the match, bending the game around their own ambitions. France, however, introduces a philosophy that directly opposes this belief. Rather than elevating every player into a potential hero, France embraces what they call the idea of suitability. Every player possesses an optimal role, and true greatness comes from maximizing that role instead of pursuing individual glory. Vivian Hugo becomes the embodiment of this ideology, orchestrating the team like the conductor who believes victory comes from the perfect organization rather than competing egos. This philosophical conflict makes the match far deeper than other matches. Neither side is presented as objectively correct throughout the game. Throughout the game, France repeatedly dismantles Blue Lock's usual strategies by predicting Isagi's influence and systematically removing him from the equation. But this isn't the fault of Isagi not being suitable to be the world's best striker, but rather a fault of his lack of rationality. As Noah said, saying "I don't know" means that idealistic conjecture is creating noise in your thinking. It's an irrational mental block. And as Ego said, some of you don't understand why we lost to France. It wasn't a tactical error or the team's strength. It was because some of you on that field didn't believe you could be the world's best. Isagi wasn't playing like how he should be. He was playing as an anchor rather than a puppeteer. In the Nigeria match, Isagi flows his ideas into the team system and strategy. But in the NEL, Isagi brought out the best in his teammates and their egos and adapted to use it for his advantage. Now obviously, it wasn't only Isagi's fault. Even with him stagnating, Rin should not have been stagnating as well. But that's because we learned that Rin's ego is actually kinda shallow. It just goes to show that maybe with the right understanding of their egos, Blue Lock could have won. That uncertainty is what makes the writing of this match so compelling. Most Blue Lock matches ultimately reinforce Ego's worldview. The France match instead invites readers to doubt it. Hugo's philosophy is not portrayed as villainous or cowardly. It is logical, efficient, and repeatedly successful. His belief that some players reach greatness by enabling others rather than becoming the star challenges the very foundation upon which Blue Lock was built. Rather than reducing football to an individual talent, the match argues that understanding one's place within a system can be just as powerful as chasing personal supremacy. This ideological battle also transforms Karasu into one of the match's most important characters. By embracing the role of a number 2, rather than insisting on being the protagonist, he demonstrates that Hugo's ideas are not entirely incompatible with Blue Lock players. His success forces both Isagi and the audience to reconsider whether Ego's philosophy is absolute or simply one path towards greatness. The match becomes less about winning on the scoreboard and more about testing the limits of Blue Lock's identity. Before the end of the first half, we get a full understanding of Vivian Hugo. He's also an egoist, just in a different way. His ego is based on his known suitability, not his carnal desires. Hugo is absolutely a brat with big and impossible dreams in his head. But with his theory, he has rationalized it to be possible with his talent and knowledge, and with the ability to back up Noel Noah. His dream can be possible, and with the addition of talents like Charles, Layden, and especially Loki, help give rise to those odds of achieving his dream. Isagi claiming that Hugo's ego is bigger than his, and Hugo scoring the second goal are the two biggest things that Isagi needed. Choosing not to go for number 1 doesn't mean that you are not an egoist, and that someone who is willingly choosing to support the number 1 can outscore them, currently in that moment, as Loki had no goals at the time of that chapter. This is what Isagi is left with before the end of the first half, and by the last minutes of this game, these two things will absolutely be necessary. The second half completely changes the pace of the game. We learn and understand that Blue Lock shouldn't be relying on only one person, as their ego shouldn't be tied to one person and their ideas, but another thing. In a battle of suitability, Japan would ultimately lose to France by the compatibility for better talents alone. In the next half, Japan chooses to bring out their 3 wildcards, and all 3 of them serve a purpose in understanding Isagi's struggle. Kunigami represents suitability, and how not playing your suitable position can still favor someone. Kunigami was built and formed to be the next gen Noel Noah, yet despite that, has now transitioned to someone who plays on defense. Not the one who scores goals, but the one who saves their team from getting scored on. This later shows how Isagi's 1% is valid, and how Hugo's philosophy is slowly crumbling. Shido represents following one's own ego as a striker. Shido has absolutely no care for what others think of his style or how he plays. He's following his desires, and that's to score a goal. This later shows how Isagi needs to let go of his insecurities and his tunnel vision on having titles and being the center of the team, and focus on his desire, which is to be the world's best striker and to beat Noel Noah. Now, Baro is the most interesting case. Isagi and Baro have always been similar in the way they play. Both are players that exploit others for the sake of their own goals. What Baro represents is Isagi finding his rebel playstyle. When we see Baro steal the ball from Karasu's pass to Shido, what do we see? A lion eating the crow, symbolizing how Baro has hunted and eaten Karasu's plans, to have Shido be his big weapon to overthrow Isagi and become Blue Lock's nucleus. And then he scored for himself. But now let's look at Isagi. When Isagi joins Karasu's system, what happens? Isagi creates a crow from his own puzzle pieces. Isagi and Baro's playstyles are similar, yes, but they have one key difference. Baro is a usurper, Isagi is a rebel. Let's look back at the NEL when Snuffy's tactics for Ubers weren't working. Who usurped the whole team in his image for his own goal? Baro. But now let's look at the match against PXG, when Ness rebelled against Kaiser. Who joined him? Isagi. And what do we learn in this match? When Isagi has a number 1 that he wants to surpass, that's when he's playing to his true suitability. And the number 1 that he wanted to surpass, shown in the flashback for the NEL, was not Rin, but Kaiser. And ultimately, when Ness rebelled against Kaiser, what happened to Isagi? He transformed into Kaiser and overthrew his rule and scored the goal through Ness's rebellion. Baro seized the ball from Karasu's kingdom as Karasu was passing the crown to Shido. Baro took it from him. Isagi rebelled against Karasu's kingdom, which was influenced by Hugo's philosophy. By acting as a spy, acting as a citizen, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike until his rebellion to Karasu, who didn't think Isagi had what it takes to score for Japan, and Hugo, who thought it was Isagi's destiny to be a midfielder and a number 2 for Japan. The final battle between Isagi and Hugo is perfect. Isagi is now following his uttermost desire like Shido, rebelling against his suitability like Kunigami, and trying to devour who he believes is the best on the pitch, like Baro. In the Nigeria match, Isagi said don't win by luck, which is ironic as that's what he's doing now, but it's because victory against someone who believes in destiny is only possible by shattering it, and Isagi's luck can do just that. Hugo after the win berates Blue Lock, saying that their theory and ideology is garbage, but this is a facade and Isagi knows it. He calls him out, saying that yeah, Blue Lock was wrong, but so was your theory. If Hugo's destiny was to beat Isagi, then he wouldn't have lost, and Hugo knows it, which is why he changes what he says. Instead of claiming them as someone he'll never match with again, he tells Isagi goodbye, and claims that until next time, egoist, acknowledging the person who he at first thought was unsuitable, to now turn around to be the very person who is suitable enough to bring his theory down and almost tie against France. For over 200 chapters, the series has consistently argued that overwhelming individual egos create the world's best striker. France introduces the possibility that football may not have a single universal truth. Greatness can emerge from absolute selfishness, but it can also emerge from perfect understanding of one's role within a greater system. Rather than invalidating ego's philosophy, the match forces it to defend itself against an equally compelling alternative. This ambiguity gives the story new depth. Instead of repeating the same lesson, Blue Lock is a genuine discussion about football itself. Is victory created by extraordinary individuals or by an extraordinary system? And is the world's greatest striker someone who dominates every play or someone who understands precisely when not to? By refusing to offer an easy answer, the France match becomes one of the manga's richest narrative achievements. Ultimately, the Japan vs France match stands amongst Blue Lock's finest because it succeeds on every level simultaneously. Because it succeeds on its ideological conflict that elevates the story beyond sports entertainment into a genuine exploration of competing philosophies of football. Rather than simply asking who is stronger, the match asks what kind of football creates true greatness. That question lingers longer after the final whistle, making the France match one of the most thoughtful and memorable in the entire series.